more global, affecting women from everywhere.
Okay, so I was diagnosed actually in my second pregnancy. My first pregnancy was in 2013, and I had developed some high blood pressure at that point in time. It was controlled, and then I ended up having preeclampsia during labor, which resulted in an emergency C-section after about 26 hours of labor. So ended up being okay after that first pregnancy. Still had some issues with blood pressure here and there, but they were well controlled with medication. I thought I had a difficult pregnancy with my first son, which is why it took so long to even consider having a second child. So in 2000, I believe it was mid 2018, we started trying again. I have PCOS, so it took a little bit of time, but we finally got pregnant with our second son. Around, I want to say it was about 28 weeks, I started to have some contractions, which wasn't unusual. Experienced that with my first pregnancy. I had gone in and they noticed that my heart rate was really elevated. It was in upper 110s to 120s, just lying down on the bed. And the doctor wasn't too concerned at that time because I said, well, you know, I've been using my inhaler a lot. I've been feeling a little short of breath. I'm an asthmatic. So, you know, just attributed it to that. My blood pressure was stable this pregnancy. They were very proactive from the start. They, you know, did the urine test so that they had a baseline to monitor on for preeclampsia. Started me on low dose pregnancy safe medication to keep the blood pressure in check, but my heart rate was always elevated. I honestly didn't really even realize that it was anything out of the ordinary just because it was so constant. It was my constant state of being, essentially. I was tracking my blood pressure frequently, even at work, and my coworkers would say, you know, is it really supposed to be that high? I'm like, oh, it's just anxiety. You know, I'm so big already, running around, stress of work. So it was actually it was a Sunday that I started to have trouble breathing. I was about 30 weeks at that point, and I was at a friend's baby shower, and it was at her mom's house, and she has a cat, and I'm highly allergic to cats. So I thought, bad allergic reaction. So as the week progresses, I'm still having trouble breathing, saying, oh man, this allergic reaction's really, you know, dragging on here. I couldn't complete a full sentence at work without really struggling to catch my breath. By that Friday, my ankles were huge. A coworker of mine walked past my desk and he's like, is that normal pregnancy swelling? I'm like, oh yeah, I'll go home, put my feet up. I actually ended up working an extra hour that day because I knew maternity leave would be coming sooner rather than later. So just trying to wrap some things up. Got home that Friday evening. My husband said, go lay down, put your feet up, just relax. So I did. I ended up dozing off for a little bit, but then woke up feeling like I couldn't breathe. And again, I'm using my inhaler, getting no relief from it. So I ended up essentially sitting upright that entire night. I didn't want to wake up my husband or anything. I'm like, I'll just wait till the morning, go to MedExpress. So that's what I did. This was in June of 2019, June 3rd, I believe. So I'm getting my older son ready for the pool. I said, I'll be right back. I'm going to run to MedExpress, get a breathing treatment, probably just have bronchitis like I always do, even in the summer. No big deal. I'll be right back. So I go to MedExpress. They take my pulse on the pulse ox when I walk in there and immediately hook me up to an EKG. Before it was even done reading, the doctor was in there. So they said, your EKG is abnormal. You need to get to the emergency room right away. We're calling an ambulance. I said, no, it's fine. It's just my asthma. Don't worry about it. And they're like, no, you're at risk of having a heart attack any moment And I was actually receiving prenatal care in our neighboring state. We're about 30 minutes away from the West Virginia border. So that's where I was going for treatment. And I said, let me sign whatever. I'll just have my husband drive me down to where I was receiving prenatal care. So I call him like, these idiots want me to go to the emergency room. I'm so mad. I've got my bag packed and everything. And he's like, all right, I'll come get you. Because they wouldn't even let me drive home. And it's, maybe a 2-3 minute drive from the urgent care facility to my house. So my husband comes and gets me. And we come home. I'm like, well, I guess I may as well grab a couple of things since we'll be stuck at the ER forever. And he's putzing around saying, okay, well, let me move this piece of furniture first. Let me get in the shower first. I'm like, well, they said I need to get to the hospital. So, we eventually make it there. And they were suspecting at first either a pulmonary embolism or deep vein thrombosis. So they did the testing for that. And it was during the chest x-ray for the pulmonary embolism that they noticed fluid around my heart and lungs. So they ended up doing a bedside echo. And the next thing you know, the doctor's coming in saying, we're transferring you across the street to the higher level hospital. From leaving the initial hospital to going to the hospital that I was admitted to, it's kind of a blur. I can remember the ambulance ride, but I was so utterly exhausted. And I think just the stress of trying to keep up with everything and hearing something may be wrong with my heart, it all just hit me. I physically couldn't keep my eyes open. I remember at some point getting into the labor and delivery ward, looking up and seeing, the big lights around me, and just medical personnel after medical personnel filing into the room. And they kept asking me, do you have a history of heart problems? All of this was happening exactly a year to the day that my dad had unexpectedly passed from a heart attack.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So that added an extra level of fear to everything, and not really knowing what's going on in general. But so I'm explaining all of that to them. Long story short, I asked one of the doctors, I said, do I have preeclampsia? And they're like, it's a little more serious than that. So they did the BNP blood test, which I didn't even realize at the time. I had so much going on. They were doing every test they possibly could. But learning about it after the fact, I had gone back through my chart, and my level at admission was almost 900. So I was admitted to the cardiac ICU at 31 weeks pregnant. I was in the ICU for about a week before I stabilized, and they were able to get me to the labor and delivery ward for the next 3 weeks of bed rest until I delivered at 34 weeks.
That is awesome.
Yeah, and thankfully the goal was a little bit longer, but I kept going into episodes of really high tachycardia. I had adenosine given, I think, about 5 times during my admission. And if you've never had that, it's a really terrifying feeling, because they put the pads on your chest. They've got the crash cart right next to you, and you can literally feel your heart stop for a moment, because that's what they're doing to try to regulate that rhythm. And when, like I said, it had been a year since my dad passed, and that was the last image I had of him in my mind, is him in his recliner with those pads on his chest. So every time that happened, I'm thinking that this is it. I'm not going to see my husband again. I'm not going to see my kid again. I'm not going to get to meet this baby. But thankfully, I had a very knowledgeable team at the hospital. And, you know, everyone from the cardiac level to labor and delivery to the maternal fetal medicine side of things, the NICU, they were all on it. They were helping educate me. You know, they would pop in just to be somebody to talk to, because I told my husband, I said, you know, just keep going to work, because we don't know what's going to happen with this. There's nothing you can do sitting here all day. So it's difficult, you know, going from working full-time mom life to having absolutely no independence, not being able to do anything for yourself, not knowing from moment to moment if you or your unborn child is even going to make it. You know, having to have those conversations with my husband, you know, hey, this is where my life insurance is, this is who you need to contact if this happens. Like, those aren't things that you want to be even thinking about during what's supposed to be the happiest time in your life. Especially at 32, you don't think you're going to go into total heart failure. So.
Exactly. And plus, you're not warned about this condition at all anyway.
No.
You know, don't even know what it is until they hit you with it. Like,
exactly.
Okay, well, you have what we call, I'm like, well, why wasn't I warned about that?
Right. You hear so much about preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, and it's like, well, where'd this come from? Like, why have I never heard this term before? Especially having blood pressure issues, you know.
Right.
So, you know, it's been a difficult year. I started at 19% of an ejection fraction, now up to recovered status, thankfully.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So still having some arrhythmia issues. I'm actually on a 30-day heart monitor now. So, I mean, you know, all things considered, very thankful and very fortunate for how things played out and being placed with the team that I was.
Right. So what weeks were you able to get through the pregnancy full term, or how did that happen?
Diagnosis was at 31 weeks, delivery was at 34. They had hoped to get me a little bit further, but my body just couldn't sustain it.
Right. Okay. And was it the same heart medications they use? Because I know a lot of the women, like with myself, I was diagnosed after pregnancy, you know, so I can't even imagine, like, you know, how they were able to treat you. And even being pregnant, I always wondered about that, because like that's so important, you know, especially because I know my medications, they was like it's harmful for pregnancy. So they do have medication for that go through for pregnancy. So that's great.
Yeah, I had a whole slew of different medications. They were pushing Lasix a lot, both, you know, at first via the IV and then orally by the tablet to get some water weight off, which definitely helped. And even after delivery, my heart failure team was very supportive of me wanting to breastfeed, even with how bad of shape I was in. You know, they were like, if this is something you want to do, we'll work with lactation consultants to find a way to make this work.
Okay, that's awesome. So you were able to continue breastfeeding.
Yeah. I pumped for my son while he was in the NICU. Yeah. Ultimately, my anxiety was too bad that I didn't sustain it once he was discharged. But, you know, that was a goal of mine, to at least pump, you know, between myself and the donor milk, with him being a preemie. And yeah, they were supportive of that.
All right, that's great. I love hearing stories about a great team. I had a great team myself. Yes, so that is wonderful. Oh,
all the difference.
Well, how did you feel? Like, not emotionally or mentally, did it change how you are now? You know, like your life and everything.
Yeah, and that's a topic my husband and I bring up a lot. Is I think when you go through something like that, you tend to value the everyday small moments a little more, because you realize how quickly they can be taken away.
Exactly.
It's not something that I would want to go through again, or if given the choice, but you know, it was a blessing in disguise because it's given me the opportunity to slow down and really appreciate the little things more.
All right. Yes, yes, I could so relate. Okay, Miss Jim, thank you so much again for sharing your
Absolutely.
story and getting our awareness out there.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks everyone for watching. I'm gonna stop our recording. And